Welcome to Comic Talkers, where comics is always the top of our discussion. My name is Brandon, and today we are doing another creator spotlight with actually a very intriguing, not even a writer, but also an artist as well. You know her from books like Above the Clouds and Monster Heart. Please welcome to the podcast. You know her as Teacup B. Her real name is Melissa. How are you doing today, Melissa?
Oh, good, good. I'm happy. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
That's no problem. We came across you at a local Comic Con. It's Stockton Con. We're out of Modesto, and what was it? We were so intrigued by your art. I remember my girlfriend coming up and was like, "Brandon, you need to come over here and check this out." And I remember looking through your book, and I was like, "This is actually really fascinating." And then I ended up buying a book, and I just love it. It is so intriguing to read. But kind of talk to fans where they can find you and help support you. And this journey and Above the Clouds, Monster Heart, and so on and so forth.
Sure, yeah. Hello. Like you said before, my username on like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, like it's all Teacup B. That's TEACUPBEE. And then my website, teacupb.com. And Monster Heart, which is my new story that I'm working on. It's a web comic that you can actually read on Webtoon Canvas. And I'm working hard on the second book right now. In fact, I just finished drafting the first chapter, which I'm very excited about.
So, what got you into the comic book world? Were there certain comic book characters that you were drawn to, even comics or teams or so on and so forth? What intrigued you with comic books?
I started as an illustrator. I was one of those kids. I always loved drawing, always trying to tell a story with my artwork. And I gravitated first towards illustration, trying to tell a story or a mood just with one image. And it wasn't until after college that I realized I want to tell a longer story. And then it occurred to me, hello, sequential art. And so I was always a big fan of Sailor Moon. I would say my gateway more so was cartoons. So Sailor Moon. I love the Sci-Fi Channel's Adult Swim, and so got introduced to like Vampire Hunter D and Robot Carnival and all the craziness that there is in anime. And yeah, I'd say I was more the manga route before getting into some Western comics. Just because in manga it was more likely I'd be able to find like female leads, I guess, women like Sailor Moon who would like kick butt and or no, he healed her enemies. Sorry. Yeah, and I just love worlds that you could get lost in. So yeah, that was definitely a lot of my inspiration, and I loved reading books, and even Breath of the Wild or Zelda. Sorry, I just started playing Breath of the Wild, the new one that just released. I'm very excited. But yeah, even Zelda, which was like this big world where this hero was out there exploring, and those were major inspirations for me.
You said you were a big fan of Sailor Moon and things like that. What got you into Sailor Moon?
Well, Cartoon Network decided to start streaming uh, Sailor Moon back in the 90s. And I saw that, and my little girl brain just went like, I was obsessed. Like, I made sure I knew what the schedule was and when it was going to be on air. And then I think it was a little bit after that that they started showing some of the shojo manga. Like, it was a big compilation comic, so it wasn't just Sailor Moon. I think it had like Parasite in it and some other big uh, comics at the time in the 90s.
Now, you just also said too, you are a big Zelda fan as well when it comes to video games and stuff like that. So, what got you into your love for that as well?
So when I was a little kid, tiny, my dad was a huge video game player. And I remember I'd sit next to him and he'd be playing the first Zelda game, and it'd be at nighttime. And as a kid, I'd easily fall asleep, and I'd tell my dad, wake me up when you get to the bad guy, the final boss. And I remember him waking me up and like, Melissa. And so, yeah, I just my whole life I watched my dad play Zelda, and that was sort of my bonding with him, and it just always stayed with me.
So would you say that would be like your favorite video game that you've played, like the first Zelda, or would you say one of the other Zeldas was some of your favorite?
Oh, so I think my favorite is Link to the Past. My stepsister, or not my step, my half sister, sorry, would come visit me during the summertime, and so we would play Zelda games when she would visit.
Mhm.
And Link to the Past was when they came out with like the little black book with the secrets. And
Yeah.
my dad would take that and he would hide it in the house. So we weren't allowed to know just like how to cheat and beat the game. And then so when he would go off to work, me and my sister would be like, and then, yeah.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, I know we kind of covered it a little bit through your interest into anime and video games that kind of got you into doing some of your comics. But what inspired you to actually not just draw your comics, but to also write? And maybe even talk about what developed your art style and the colors that you used too, and that, and Above the Clouds and Monster and many other works you have.
Sure. Well, with colors, I think it's interesting how the personality of the artist sort of comes out with their choice of lines and colors. And I tend to be, I guess, more of a softer person. And I think that's kind of got reflected in my color palette. Like I'm pretty quiet. It wasn't until I started doing conventions and I was behind a table that it forced me to have to start talking and being able to talk about my work. Um, so that definitely factored in as far as colors. And I'm trying to think like line quality wise. Um, I was always just such a huge fan of like really flowy lines. So Alphonse Mucha was a huge inspiration. John Waterhouse, which are pre-Raphaelite artists. Um, and comic book layouts, oddly enough, like Hellboy, I feel like he makes the most beautiful comic book layouts. Like I love just I got one of those artist editions where it's like a big book copy and it just has the comic layouts and his black and just like the black and whites.
Mhm.
And yeah, it really started making me think about how to make sure that when you're reading a comic, it's not just one page that you're looking at, but how you're consuming and viewing both pages at once. Like when you turn it, like your eyes just can't help but take in the full spread. And so that was a huge inspiration behind my lines,
Now,
comics.
like we said too, and it's like you said earlier, the fact being that a good comic should not tell you a story by just words; it should tell you a story by art. And I think that's a great inspiration to anybody because great comic books do tell a great story, and but the art is what art is. I'll admit the heart is probably the harder part in my eyes. Or would you agree? Like the art's harder than writing, or is it writing harder than art?
Oh my goodness. I feel okay, so Above the Clouds is half silent. And part of the reason why I decided to tell half of it just through imagery was I felt like writing was its own mountain, like its own art form. And uh, Above the Clouds was my first attempt at doing a comic. Um, I mean, sorry, let me backtrack. I had tried making a comic before and it didn't get anywhere. And Above the Clouds was actually one that I stuck with and finished. Um, and so part of that was I gave myself the rule like I can't make it perfect, and as long as I get one page done, then it's already a success. And part of making it not this huge, overwhelming mountain was um, just trying to tell an image or a story just through the imagery, and I'll learn along the way the telling part of the story with dialogue. Um, and for those not familiar, Above the Clouds is like a half silent graphic novel that intertwines two stories. And it follows this girl named Eiley who's given this book. And she falls in love with the story only to find out that it doesn't have an ending. And she has to get this author to finish it. And so as we're reading the story, uh, or as Eiley is reading the story, we get to see it through her imagination, and that's when there's words and dialogue to sort of differentiate between the two worlds.
Now I have to ask you because that was going to be my next question is kind of getting into the inspiration or what Above the Clouds was, so you can kind of tell fans that too. What was the inspiration for Eileen? Like I have to ask that because it's interesting to see. Like I think that's all of us at one point or another that we want to see where the story goes, and now there's no ending. It's just so what. So what was your inspiration for Eileen?
I feel like the story kind of unfolded when uh so when I started Above the Clouds, I actually started with this one. I just wrote it down. I think it was at a family holiday event, and I wrote down in my phone, "Boy gives a girl a book," and like I really loved the imagery. And uh, the next day, like I drew out a couple comic character sheets, and the day after that, I drew out 2 pages. And I'm like, oh my god, it's going somewhere. And at the beginning, like I really want to do a romance, but as I started doing the story, like the characters were like, no, you're not telling a romance. And so I think as I developed the characters, like Kian is this person who's very unsure of himself, afraid to share this part of himself, who wants to tell stories. And Eiley just happens, across his book. And so Eiley became this character where, you have someone who's like, I really want to know, you know, what's happening next, or someone who just like is sort of in your corner, and they believe in you. And so that became the inspiration with Eiley. Not only someone who was like really inspired by the story she was reading, but someone who also wanted to make her own worlds and had her own struggles with like telling her mom, like, I want to do art. And, the mom's like, you have chores, you don't have time to do. uh, so yeah. And so yeah, both these characters, Eiley and Kian, are people who have to kind of fight for the direction that they want in their life and to be brave. And yeah.
The other question I have for you regarding Above the Clouds is how long did it take you to create this really great story that you've presented to fans and everything? How long was the process to do everything that you did for this story?
So, oh my goodness. So the process, um, I would say, evolved over time. It
Mhm.
took me 5 years to complete this whole story. And at the beginning, like I told you before, where I started with that sentence and I started page by page. Above the Clouds really was half flying by the seat of my pants as I created the page, and then slowly developing and getting more. Well, I started developing an outline, so I had like a skeleton of the story beats, and so I knew how it was going to end as I was starting this comic. Like it played out like a movie trailer in my mind, and I knew where I wanted to take it, which was, I think, really helpful in making sure that the story stayed consistent and cohesive. Um, Knowing where I wanted to go, and then over time, like as I finished the first chapter, I'd go into the second chapter, and then I started thinking more of like uh, breaking down not just the overall story, but thinking of like the smaller details within the chapters. And so it really was over the course of those years that I developed the process of having the story come together. But knowing the ending was like key, I think, in the whole thing.
Oh, it's like you said, it's like you're building that story, and it's like I said, I think the best part is having that end right away because it's one of those things that you can build that story off of. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
what are the twists and turns that I could put in here, or what's this, or what you can play around with it a little bit more. But no, now not only do you have Above the Clouds, you also have Monster Heart. Now that's a
Yeah.
new one I know you've been working on lately. You've been putting it out on Webtoons, everything like that. Yes, right there. So tell the fans a little bit about your inspiration for Monster Heart and where this story came from.
So Monster Heart's very different from Above the Clouds. It came from, I'd say, the end of 2020. The big inspiration was I was on Zoom with my buddies. Like we had like an art night once a week, and we'd all just be on Zoom drawing together. And we would like joke about doing a combined world. And at the time, I just called it like Monster Hunter. Came up with this Monster Hunter kind of character, but it kind of evolved from that. So Monster Heart came from realizing that like a whole year was passing by and I wasn't getting anything done. So I made a vow to myself. I go, by the end of December, I'm gonna thumbnail out a story, and whatever it is, I'm just going to draw it and go for it, because to me it was more important that I started getting back into the rhythm of creating comic pages. Um, and so like I thumbnailed out the story, like the same kind of thing happens where I think I have like a music playlist and a song would inspire like a movie trailer that would play in my mind. And so I knew how the first book in Monster Heart would end. Um, and so yeah, Monster Heart developed out of desperation. Get myself back into the rhythm making pages
Yeah.
and having fun too. Like I'm a huge I love urban fantasy books. And so I figured like every project I do, I try to add something that helps push me to learn something new or to try to take on something more. And with Monster Heart, it's definitely like an older, yeah, like young adult story. There's definitely more dialogue, and yeah.
So tell the fans a little bit about where the story can take them. If you could give like a quick synopsis of what your Monster Heart is all about, and you could pitch it to a new fan, what would it be?
So Monster Heart follows Robin, who gets sucked into this community of monsters um, in this like really dangerous city that need her help, and she unbegrudgingly finds herself um, liking that she's needed, I guess, and helping this community. And so it's really about finding your found family, I guess. And it's gonna have like monsters, obviously, and strong women with swords and dragons, and yeah.
Now, I'm also going to ask something I know we've talked about before, that not only do you write your stories, you also draw. What are some of the best things, or what are some of the things I know we talked about what you love about it. Well, what are some of the challenges you have faced or experienced doing both things?
Um, I would say the hard part definitely is when you're one man team, and you're kind of like in this bubble. It's having to remind yourself to really seek outside feedback,
Mhm.
um, and getting advice on like how people are receiving the story. Maybe that like you look at something for so long that you can miss things, and so it's good having fresh eyes say like, hey, this looks a little off, or my grammar is atrocious. So it's uh, the biggest thing is people correcting my grammar and my spelling. um yeah. That's definitely the hard part, because it's hard because I mean, even after doing this for so long, it is hard to share things at times when something is new, and you kind of have to just like get over that hurdle and like just throw it out there, just go for it. It's okay to fail.
Now, we do have the harder question for you. Out of Monster Heart, Above the Clouds, anything that you've created, what has been the favorite story that you have created? What is your all-time favorite one that you've said, I really do enjoy where I'm going with this?
uh well, I guess um I would say Above the Clouds is still my favorite, because I had never experienced flow like that before, where you start getting to this amazing rhythm where you're like, yes, I have to create this thing. And like it created um it created a, what would you call it? I knew what to expect of my days, because I had a rhythm of how I was like working on pages and how many I was getting every week. And it became my schedule of that gave me purpose. And this was a story that I felt like opened up a lot of doors, because I was showing that at the time, before it was in a hardcover book, I released it as floppies. So every chapter that I finished, I would print, and it was showing that I could start something and that I could finish it. And people seeing that I had the ability to do that opened up a lot of doorways, and I got opportunities like doing variant covers for. I did one for Adventure Time, which was pretty cool, and some other uh, comics, and yeah, it was what the comic that gave me purpose, and I felt like really changed my life. And I feel like I'll be forever grateful for Above the Clouds and what it helped me with.
The next question I have for you is for anybody who is trying to create their own comic. You know, I know everybody has a different themes like you have and others have. What would be the advice you would give them to continue pursuing?
The one thing that I experienced myself that stopped me many times from completing a comic before I got to Above the Clouds, and that I've seen other creators experience is oftentimes they give themselves this gigantic mountain and they have this story that they want to work on, and they've made it so precious that they're afraid to make any mistake with it. And when you're afraid to make a mistake, it makes it hard for you to start. And I feel like the most important thing is that you just need to start. And so if they're trying to build up their skills as a comic creator, I would uh, invite them to work on a story um, that allows them to not be afraid to make mistakes, that they're not going to be precious with, that they can tell themselves, if I get one page done, it's already a success because I have made a thing. Because I feel like making something is better than zero. Because zero, you don't have any foundation to build off of. And then, yeah.
So we want to ask you, Melissa, is there anything coming down the pipeline that you are at this point in time that you would like to share to fans that you are working on or you would like to share that you're working on more?
Well, the second book of Monster Heart, I mentioned before, I just finished drafting the first chapter to book two, which I'm very excited about. That's the main project that I'm trying to keep myself focused on. And then also on the back end, I don't have anything I could really share, but my goal is to eventually tell a romance story. I want to tell a short romance story, so I've started working on sketches that have made me super excited, and I started sharing some of those, but no promises on the romance story yet. So yeah, mainly Monster Heart.
We want to thank you, Melissa, again for coming on, joining us, and talking about your love for comics, what got you into it, talk a little bit about Above the Clouds and Monster Heart. So again, tell the fans where they can come out, follow you, support you. Where can they find you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And again, I'm Teacup Bee, and you can find me on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Those are all the places. And teacupbee.com if you want to see other illustrations that I've done.
No, we appreciate it again. As always, Comic Talkers can be found. You can listen to this podcast here exclusively on YouTube. So please like that button. Follow Melissa on her social media. Go support her. What was it? As always, you can subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you never miss an episode like this. We hope to have Melissa on to future episodes, so we hope to hear from her soon and get that all set up. So please tune in.
Too.
What was it? As always, you can also listen to other great comic book anime content on Spotify for podcasters, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, so many other platforms. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Comic Talkers. And without further ado, my name is Brandon, and never forget, may comics always be the top of your discussion.